Alright everyone, the purge has begun. Today's first video talking, of course, about Liz Cheney's ousting as the House GOP chair. So she's no longer a leader within the Republican Party. There's also attendantly to this a second story, which is that a bunch of disgruntled neocons they've penned a letter openly threatening to form a third party and leave the GOP. I'll cover that separately because it deserves its own video. I just thought it was relevant to the interests of anyone hearing about Liz Cheney. Of course, this is a good thing. Kicking the war pig neocon hatchet people out of the GOP improves the GOP. With each marginal success at doing this, it makes the GOP less unpalatable. Because for a long time it was like basically, do you want to drink arsenic or strychnine, basically choosing between these two mainline parties, to the point where a lot of people would go third party anyway. Now the GOP is improving. They're kicking out the worst members of the party and embracing populism, which is, hey, the government should actually represent the people that are paying it. Now, first and foremost, if you're watching this video on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment down below with links to 4 other video hosting sites that I use. Again, and I say this every day in my first video, I make 4 videos a day, only 2 of them go on YouTube. The other 2 go on all of those sites except for YouTube. There will also be a link to my Substack. I did another entry today. I'm going to slow it down though now, so people's emails don't get overloaded. You can sign up for the email list there, join Substack, maybe make your own articles. It's sort of like a souped-up, censorship-free version of Medium. So it's definitely relevant to my interests with regards to political analysis, predictions, polls, and things of that nature. I may go a little bit further than that as well. So Liz Cheney, keeping in mind, and we should mention this every time we talk about the issue, is Dick Cheney's daughter. You know, his name is Dick for a reason. So you've got one of the most desperate, bitter, warmongering crooks of the century. And his daughter enters politics. Now, a senator or a congressperson is supposed to represent the people that voted for them. In the case of a House member, this is a House district. In the case of a senator, it's a state. Initially, they weren't even popularly elected. They were elected by state legislative bodies. They appointed the senators. We should probably go back to doing that to save our republic. Keep it from devolving into direct democracy in the age of the internet, when more and more people are demanding that we do that and fuck ourselves in the ass. Liz Cheney has no mandate. She's acting petulant, like she deserves her House leadership position, despite the fact that her approval rating in Wyoming, the only people in the entire country whose opinion about her, by the way, technically matters at all, is in the 20s. In the toilet. Lower than almost any other member of Congress. Now, Congress in general, here's the funny thing. Congress always gets low marks for approval. And then the most visible figures, if you take national polls, like Pelosi's at what, 25% approval, Schumer, I think, slightly higher, only 30. But typically, at least in their state, at least, you know, they got elected for a reason, they tend to have reasonable approval. It might be middling in the 40s or something, but to be in the 20s that's basically you're going to lose your job territory. Liz Cheney, therefore, is trying to do what others have done. Bill Weld did this, Mitt Romney does this, which is say, look, even if I lose this job, I can at least get a lucrative grifting thing going, because even if only 5 or 6% of the Republican population are never Trumpers, and trust me, it might be lower than that, which is why this letter about forming a third party is completely useless nonsense, it's still millions of people. You can still get them to donate. Look at the Lincoln Project. The Lincoln Project is staffed by a bunch of liberals, but they've managed to convince people that they're actually expat Republicans, despite the fact that they do literally nothing with the money that they get except for whine on Twitter about the GOP. They even whine about their fellow neocons because they're grifters. Say they want money. In the last cycle, and AOC fucking pointed this one out, they took in millions of dollars. What did they do for it? They did 2 things, making tweets, which of course doesn't cost money, and they put up 1 billboard. That's it. A single billboard for a short-term ad campaign. They took the other millions and they ran with it. They're making a huge amount of money. These Weaver attendant individuals that had to cover their asses and throw that bastard under the bus, they're still making millions of dollars. It's very lucrative. And this is what Sharpton does, this is what Jesse Jackson does, this is what BLM does, this is what Duke does, this is what all of these people do, whether it's based on race, ideology, creed, religion. Megachurch pastors and shit do this. It's a grift. You don't need to fool the majority of the population. All you need to do is fool a few tens or hundreds of thousands of people, and you've got your payday. You've got it made. You've got to. There's work cut out for you. You have to keep fooling them over and over, but it's a lot easier than having to go to a 9-to-5 now, isn't it? These people are making millions. I think Liz Cheney realizes she's probably going to get fired from her position, and not just the leadership position. She's been kicked aside by the GOP and reprimanded. They're probably going to endeavor to get rid of her altogether from the House of Representatives. That being said, she keeps her pension, which, I mean, Wyoming representative, it's probably not, the kind of money she's used to. Her name's out there, she's in the news, and she's running with it. She's using that as a platform right now, essentially to cement a long-term political presence outside of the GOP's ranks. That's what she's doing. Maybe she'll have a craptivistic group. Maybe she'll join these other morons in forming a third party that they'll be using basically as just a cash cow. They'll be using it as their private piggy bank. Remember, Ilhan Omar was giving millions of dollars to her husband's consulting firm with campaign donations. How that is not illegal, I'm not exactly sure. I don't even think that the FEC is really looking into it, which makes sense because the swamp is back. The tide came back in. Unfortunately, the swamp was drained only to refill as soon as Beijing Biden got in there. And now we're seeing a lot of persecution and economic problems. By the way, just as an aside, and this is bad for the neocons and the Democrats, don't you think it's a little bit like the 70s? I remember when Ramsey Paul was actually talking about how he thought that we were entering a new Jimmy Carter-esque era. I totally agree, and we're seeing that now. You've got fuel problems, shortages, the pipeline attack and so forth, higher gas prices. You got the oil shocks. You've got inflation taking off. As of April, inflation coming in twice as high as it should have been. Yeah, we're back in the 70s. The only good thing to look forward to is that next, hopefully, we get second-term Trump, a.k.a. Ronald Reagan, back, and then we can finally get back to work and solve some of these fucking issues that we've got, and hope Biden doesn't completely destroy everything, especially in foreign policy in the meantime. Liz Cheney has basically made her recent career about, hey, I voted to impeach Trump, cross the aisle, which was a terrible, if you're in fucking Wyoming, that's probably a bad idea. It's not like you're a Republican in a swing state. It's not like you're a Republican who happens to be there in a marginally blue state, like a New Mexico Republican. You're in Wyoming. You're in one of the reddest states in the Union, one of the most pro-Trump states, and you think you're going to get away with this. Your only job as a member of the House is to represent your congressional district, which in Wyoming's case, I believe, is the same thing as a senator, which is Wyoming. I think they only have one representative. Or do they have two now? I think they only have one. Vermont, Wyoming, and Alaska, I think, are the ones that only have a single person. I think the Dakotas, maybe they have a second one. You look at the size of Bismarck or Pierre, not exactly thriving metropolitan areas. Anyway, she's not doing her job. We've gotten to the point where culture believes that senators and people in Congress and the House are supposed to represent a federal platform, but that's literally not why they're hired. The whole point of the bicameral legislative system is a House comprised of people who are elected by relatively small groups of people in districts to represent that district's specific economic and diplomatic interests. That's the only purpose. In the case of a senator, they represent a state. They represent the will of that state, technically the state legislative body. So that's their job. There are very few people in Congress that appear to recognize this. Now, most of them come from deeply partisan states or districts. And so they just go along with that partisan line. But then you get a Joe Manchin technically doing what he's paid to do, represent the will of West Virginians in his case. He gets lambasted, and the same people bitching and moaning and whining about him are congratulating Liz Cheney because they've been taken in by Orange Man bad propaganda. And that is what it is. Donald Trump never fomented an insurrection. It simply never happened. There was a riot at the Capitol after literally a year of much more violent riots were happening all across the country and getting called mostly peaceful protests by the same people that condemned the so-called insurrection in D.C. Trump held a rally, told people to go home with love in their hearts, and somehow this was construed as attempting to overthrow democracy. Liz Cheney, who is a desperate war pig bitch warmonger, does not belong in Congress. She represents the past of the GOP, a shitty past that people like me could never support. The reason Liz Cheney might as well be a picture of her next to a little ditty about why I could never consider myself a Republican. The GOP is much improved because of her ousting right now. Now they just need to kick her out of Congress altogether. Primary her out. It won't be hard. Her approval's in the 20s. It's in the shitter. No Democrat's going to win the position from you. It's Wyoming. It's like, what, 70% Republicans, partisans, or some insane number like that? Get rid of Liz Cheney, and while you're at it, get rid of Romney. Get rid of all of these people. Make it clear that George W. doesn't represent the current trend of the party. It was funny, the Lincoln Project the other day is like, well, it's no longer the party of Lincoln, it's the party of Trump. So in other words, it's the party of this century as opposed to the 19th century. Well, no shit. Yeah, the Republican Party is actually improving. I never expected that to happen, considering how bad they were under W, or the dysfunction and lockdown, gridlock that happened in the early wave of Obama. Considering that, I never expected that there was any hope for them at all. I figured they'd just fucking die as a party because they had pissed off so many millennials. Now they're actually acting respectable and shit. It's difficult to find a Republican prior to basically the last half decade that had any balls. You can name them on your fingers. You count them on your fingers. Now they actually stand for something. You may not agree with what they stand for, but at least they're not kneeling like the fucking Democrats are at the moment. That's about all. Peace out.